So I'm going to talk about the word integrate this morning. Somebody in a group that I taught yesterday asked me to speak about it yesterday from my glossary definition. And as I was teaching on it yesterday and thinking about it yesterday and today, I'm really thinking out what is that experience when things integrate? And I find it's really hard to find words for it. It's 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 just something that happens almost so internally that it's hard to find words. But I do hear Linda's voice. FYI, she's not with us this morning because she's on retreat with a couple of other Gen X Buddhist teachers from different traditions. Anyway, I hear Linda's voice about, as she describes integration, and I hear her voice saying, things are rub against one another, mix and blend. You may hear her words a little differently, but I think that's a pretty good experiential description of integration. So this thing called integrating, it's not always a cognitive process, although how we're thinking is part of it. And also I'm thinking, and I'm actually exploring this with you right now, but it's something that's likely to occur when we're more still and aware, although it happens at many other times in our life. When I say more still and aware, I'm referring to meditation at this point. And for me, and I don't know how it is for you, it's almost like I've taken in too much from my life, what's going on, and I feel like all this stimulation and I need to digest it. I use a lot of terms that refer to the GI system when I think about integration. And if I don't integrate it, I kind of feel something that's like bloated with stimulation. Of course, it's not bloated in my GI system, and I don't know what system it's bloated in. It feels like, in my psyche, I am bloated with stimulation in my body, mind. So I did an interesting thing. I found it interesting anyway, which is I searched in the books inside our book, Reflective Meditation, Cultivating Kindness and Curiosity in the Buddhist Company. And I searched in it for how many times we use the word integration. I found it on 17 different times. And I went through each of these, and my talk is going to be based on this. And I went through each of these little quotes about integration and really thought it through a bit further. Like, why did we use the word integration here? What do we mean when we are using the word integration? And the whole point of this talk is really for you to think about that. Like, what do things integrate for you? What is that experience like to you? Does it matter to you? Does it seem to be helpful? So the dictionary definition of the word integrate is to combine, and then it says in parentheses, one thing with another. I think it can be many things so that they become a whole. It's an interesting definition because I do think I feel a sense of wholeness when things integrate. Again, what do I mean by a sense of wholeness? It's an experience, hard to describe. But I think integration is very fundamental to reflective meditation. And as I was going through these 17 quotes, I realized that we use it in different ways as different spheres of experience integrate with different spheres. So I'm going to begin with the glossary entry, my glossary entry, which is really at the back of the book. Integrate. As you gain greater awareness of experience, multiple aspects come together or integrate in a way that is healing. For example, my stomach churns, I tremble a bit, and then hear the distant sound of a siren. I remember my recent hospitalization. This awareness comes together, and I feel tender towards myself. Often this process takes place below the threshold of awareness, but somehow I feel better afterwards. It feels as though I've digested my experience. So now I'm going to do a little reflection on that quote that I wrote many, many years ago, maybe like 7 years ago. It was a long time ago. And as I reflect on that quote, I realized that the kind of integration I'm referring to is internal. And it sort of follows like a sequence, but I'm not sure that's the sequence, but maybe it's the sequence of awareness, not the sequence in which things actually happened internally. But the first thing in this situation, not always, is the awareness of the body, the stomach. They say now that we have a brain in our stomach, right? So often our stomach, when it actually doesn't feel so good usually for me, but that might be my first awareness, a sense of churning, in this case, in my stomach, and trembling a bit. Also, I think a bodily description, but more sort of overall in my body. And then the awareness of a siren. So who knows the order that really happened? I probably more sort of subliminally heard that siren, and that led to the churning stomach and the trembling, but I'm not going to make a stand on that. But then if the cognition comes in this case, I'm not saying it's always this way, the memory of my recent hospitalization. But there's something also that happens here that I think is really, really important. I feel tender towards myself. Really, the siren kicked off the memory of a trauma. I think hospitalizations are traumas. And that I'm able to feel tender to myself, really compassionate to myself in the face of this trauma of the hospitalization I had for being dizzy, actually. My dizziness got so bad. So the trauma, so the point I think of this is how the trauma integrates is really matters. This time it integrated with self-compassion. That's a whole different kind of integration than when it's just kind of repeating itself and leading to more trauma. That's called PTSD. Okay, the next quote, and this is in the endorsements, and this endorsement is from Josh Summers. I want to make a plug here that Linda and I did a podcast with him, and a couple months ago, and it just got posted, and it's on the reflectivemeditation.org website. The first thing, most recent, so it's first in the list. And I don't know, I don't mean to sound whatever, the opposite of humility, but I thought it was a very good podcast. I think the three of us hit on some good points, so I advise it. Back to the quote. Read on, and you may discover, as I did, a gentler, kinder, and more ethical doorway into the heart of the middle way. So this quote was really interesting to try to break down, and I'm not done. But the word in this quote, a more ethically integrated doorway into the heart of the middle way, the word's being used around ethics, and also, ethics are like matter so much. There's so much what Buddhism is about. And so I think what he's addressing here, it's not just enough to know ethics, to have them memorized, to know the precepts, even to, vow to follow the precepts, but then how do they integrate into your life? And so that's interesting to me, ethics and integration. More for me to think about. Oh, I have several more quotes, and it's time to move on to meditation. So I will continue with this on Wednesday. And I invite you to consider in the days in the meditation, however it happens, what is that experience of integration for you? And is it important? Is it valuable? Is it beneficial?